August 6, 1945, 8:14 a.m. Hiroshima. Dr. Michihiko Hachiya stood at the window of his second-floor office at Hiroshima Communications Hospital, examining patient records and considering the morning's scheduled surgeries when the flash came, light brighter than thousand suns that turned his vision white and then black in sequence so rapid that his brain couldn't process the transition. The flash lasted approximately 1/millionth of a second. The light traveled at 186,000 miles per second, reaching Hiroshima from release point 1,900 feet above the city in 0.00001 seconds. The thermal radiation that accompanied the light reached surface temperatures of 7,000 degrees Fahrenheit at ground zero, hotter than surface of sun. The blast wave that followed traveled at 980 miles per hour, faster than sound, reaching Hachiya's hospital 1.2 miles from ground zero in approximately 4.4 seconds. In those 4.4 seconds between flash and blast wave arrival, Hachiya's mind processed that something unprecedented had occurred. The flash was unlike anything in his medical experience or military training. Air raids produced flames and explosions that built from ignition through combustion to blast. This flash had come from nowhere, instantaneous light without apparent source followed by darkness. Then the blast wave arrived. The hospital building, two-story reinforced concrete structure designed to withstand earthquakes, shook as if the earth itself had moved. Windows exploded inward, ceiling tiles fell. The floor buckled. Hachiya was thrown against the wall by force that felt like invisible giant hand pushing him. When he regained consciousness seconds later, the building was collapsing around him and he could hear screaming from patients and staff throughout the hospital. Think about that. A physician trained in modern medicine standing in reinforced hospital building, experiencing weapon so far beyond his frame of reference that his mind couldn't categorize what was happening. Assuming earthquake or perhaps massive conventional bombing raid when in fact he was witnessing first use of atomic weapon that would kill 70,000 people immediately and another 70,000 within 5 years from radiation effects that science barely understood. What Hachiya didn't know as he struggled to free himself from rubble was that at 8:15 a.m. and 17 seconds, the Boeing B-29 Superfortress Enola Gay, flying at 31,060 feet, had released single bomb weighing 9,700 pounds, containing 141 pounds of uranium-235, configured in gun-type assembly that achieved critical mass through conventional explosive firing one uranium hemisphere into another at 1,000 feet per second. What Hachiya didn't know was that the device, codenamed Little Boy by Americans who built it, had achieved nuclear fission, creating energy release equivalent to 15,000 tons of TNT in explosion so powerful that it vaporized everything within 1,000 feet of ground zero, created firestorm that consumed everything within 4.4 square miles, and generated blast wave that destroyed buildings within 5 square miles. That single weapon had released more destructive energy than 2,000 fully loaded B-29 bombers could deliver using conventional explosives. What Hachiya didn't know was that the thermal radiation from the explosion had created shadows, permanent imprints on concrete and stone where human bodies had blocked the radiation, creating negative images that would remain visible for decades as monuments to instantaneous vaporization. That people within half-mile of ground zero had been reduced to ash so fine that no remains would ever be recovered. That survivors would develop radiation sickness, mysterious illness causing nausea, hair loss, internal bleeding, and death weeks or months after exposure to invisible rays that damaged cells at molecular level. What Hachiya didn't know was that the weapon represented culmination of Manhattan Project, 3-year effort employing 130,000 people across 30 sites, consuming $2 billion in 1940s dollars to build device that would fundamentally alter human civilization. That American scientists had solved theoretical and engineering problems that Japanese physicists had concluded were impossible. That industrial capacity gap between America and Japan had extended even to building weapons that harnessed fundamental forces of universe. What Hachiya didn't know was that black rain would fall 30 minutes after explosion, radioactive water condensed from mushroom cloud mixed with ash and debris, that people seeking to wash off burns would expose themselves to additional radiation, that the rain would contaminate water supplies and soil for miles around ground zero, that the rain's radioactivity would cause additional cancers decades later among people who weren't near ground zero during blast but were caught in downpour. What Hachiya didn't know was that he would survive to document the experience in diary that would become primary medical record of atomic bombing effects, that his testimony along with thousands of other survivors would create moral argument against nuclear weapons that would influence international policy for remainder of century, that his clinical observations of radiation sickness would establish medical framework for understanding and treating radiation exposure that nuclear age made necessary knowledge. The mathematics of nuclear warfare were being written in uranium fission reactions and thermal radiation across Hiroshima's ruins, and those mathematics would prove something that political and military leaders had understood theoretically, but not viscerally, that scientific progress had created weapons capable of destroying cities instantly, and that future conflicts between nuclear-armed nations risked exterminating human species. By the time Hachiya extracted himself from rubble and began treating injured patients who were arriving at the partially collapsed hospital, the mushroom cloud had risen to 40,000 feet and was visible from 360 miles away. The city of 350,000 people had been reduced to burning ruins where 70,000 corpses lay in streets too damaged for rescue workers to reach. The world had changed permanently, though most of humanity wouldn't understand the implications until weeks later when details of atomic bombing became public knowledge. July 1945. The decision to use atomic weapons against Japan emerged from Potsdam Conference through convergence of military assessment, political calculation, and Manhattan Project momentum. President Harry S. Truman learned of atomic bombs' existence April 12, 1945, first day as president. Secretary of War Henry Stimson briefed him. Within 4 months, United States would possess a weapon capable of destroying entire cities. Decision about use would fall to Truman. Military situation, July 1945. Operation Downfall, planned invasion, would cost 500,000 American casualties, according to military estimates. Japanese forces, 2.3 million troops with orders to fight to death. Iwo Jima and Okinawa demonstrated Japanese resistance patterns. Casualty rates exceeded European theatre substantially. Strategic bombing had destroyed most Japanese cities. Japanese leadership showed no inclination towards surrender. Military-controlled government. Doctrine emphasized decisive battle inflicting casualties that would force negotiated peace. Strategy assumed American public would lose will if casualties reached projected levels. Alternative strategies existed. Naval blockade would starve Japan, might take years. Massive civilian casualties through famine. Continued conventional bombing hadn't forced surrender. Demonstration in uninhabited area risked dismissal as trick, wasted one of 2 available weapons. Target Committee recommended military targets with surrounding populations, pure military installations, isolated, bomb effects wasted on empty terrain, pure civilian targets, too morally problematic. Compromise, cities containing military facilities surrounded by civilian populations. Hiroshima selection factors, headquarters of 2nd General Army, 40,000 troops, major military logistics and communications center. Terrain, flat delta surrounded by hills, would focus blast wave. City largely spared conventional bombing, clear demonstration of single weapons power. Preservation, deliberate. City on restricted target list since May 1945. Undamaged state would provide unambiguous measurement of atomic weapon effects. Interim committee recommended weapon be used without warning as soon as possible. Surprise would maximize psychological impact. Warning would allow moving prisoners to target or intercepting bomber. Committee acknowledged moral implications but concluded ending war quickly saved more lives. Truman approved July 25, 1945. Military order directing delivery as soon as weather permitted after August 3rd. Order carefully worded as military directive rather than political decision, allowing Truman to claim he approved military recommendation rather than personally deciding to kill civilians. August 6, 1945. Boeing B-29. Superfortress Enola departed Tinian 2:45 a.m. Little Boy atomic bomb. Crew of 12. Equipment for documenting weapon none fully understood. Colonel Paul Tibbets commanded. Experienced pilot. European and Pacific theaters. Selected for skill and trustworthiness. Named aircraft after Mother Enola Tibbets. Gesture appropriate for routine mission. Inappropriate for mission killing 140,000 people. Bomb occupied entire bay. 120 inches long. 28 inches diameter. 9,700 pounds. Armed in flight, removing safety plugs, installing detonators, prevented accidental detonation during takeoff or crash. Mission plan, 7 aircraft assembly over Iwo Jima. Enola with bomb. 2 observation aircraft with instruments and cameras. Weather reconnaissance aircraft. Assembly occurred 6 a.m. at 9,300 feet. Formation proceeded toward Japan at 220 miles. Weather reconnaissance radioed 7 a.m. Conditions over Hiroshima, favorable. Visibility good, minimal cloud cover. Confirmed Hiroshima as primary target rather than alternates Kokura or Nagasaki. Enola reached initial point 8:09 a.m. Bombing run from 31,060 feet. Bombardier Captain Thomas Ferriby acquired Aoi Bridge, T-shaped bridge near city center. Bomb bay doors opened 8:14 a.m. Weapon released 8:15 a.m. and 17 seconds. Bomb fell 43 seconds. Velocity, approximately 600 meters/hour. Barometric detonators triggered at 1,900 feet altitude. Horizontal position, 550 feet southeast of Aoi Bridge. Gun-type assembly fired uranium projectile into target at 8:16 a.m. Critical mass achieved. Fission reaction initiated. Fission of approximately 2 pounds uranium-235, less than 2% of total, released energy equivalent to 15,000 tons TNT. Temperature at fireball center, several million degrees. Light visible to crew 11.5 miles away. Flash followed seconds later by shockwave shaking aircraft. Tibbets executed 155-degree diving turn, maneuver designed to maximize distance before shockwave arrival. Turn so aggressive, crew experienced 4.5 G-forces. At detonation, Enola was 11.5 miles from ground zero, traveling 328 mph. Enough distance that shockwave dissipated to non-dangerous level approximately 60 seconds after detonation. 8:16 a.m. Nuclear fission at 1,900 feet created fireball 900 feet diameter, surface temperature 7,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Matter existed as plasma. Thermal radiation traveled at light speed, reached ground zero in 0.0006 seconds. Thermal pulse lasted 3 seconds. Delivered radiant energy sufficient to vaporize human tissue, ignite wood and paper, melt low melting point metal, carbonize organic matter. Distance correlations. Within 1,000 feet, vaporized completely, no remains recovered. Within 3,000 feet, thermal burns fatal to exposed skin. Within 5,000 feet, first-degree burns, clothing ignited. Blast wave followed thermal pulse, traveled 980 mph, faster than sound at sea level. Overpressure at ground zero, 35 pounds per square inch. Pulverized reinforced concrete. Winds exceeded 600 km/h, flattened everything within 1,000 feet. Overpressure decreased with distance, remained sufficient to destroy wooden buildings within 8,000 feet, damaged buildings within 12,000 feet. Sequence created distinctive damage patterns. Thermal radiation ignited fires.
Blast wave extinguished through overpressure and wind. Fires reignited after blast passed. Firestorm eventually consumed 4.4 square miles. Thermal radiation created shadows where objects blocked radiation. Human shadows on concrete, ladder shadows on walls, building shadows on pavement. Permanent records of explosion geometry studied for decades. Fireball rose through convection. Updraft carried dust, debris, vaporized material. Altitude, 40,000 feet within minutes. Column width, 3 miles. Temperature at base, 5,000 degrees. Rising column drew in air from surrounding area. Winds at ground level, 60 mph inward toward ground zero. Duration, 43 minutes until dispersal. Column condensed into mushroom cloud. Stem of rising debris capped by mushroom formed by water vapor condensation in rapidly cooling air. Physical measurements documented weapon effects with precision that would define nuclear warfare calculations for decades. Fireball diameter 900 feet. Temperature surface 7,000 degree F. Temperature core several million degrees. Thermal pulse duration 3 seconds. Light intensity brighter than sun at comparable distance. Thermal radiation by distance 1,000 feet. Instantaneous vaporization 3,000 feet. Third degree burns fatal. 5,000 feet. Second degree burns. 7,500 feet. First degree burns. Blast wave overpressure. Ground zero, 35 psi, reinforced concrete destroyed, 3,000 feet, 5 psi, heavy structural damage, 8,000 feet, 1.5 psi, moderate damage. Wind velocity, ground zero, 600 plus mph, 3,000 feet, 200 ms, 8,000 feet, 70 ms. Wind effects combined with overpressure to multiply destruction. Mushroom cloud, maximum height, 40,000 feet. Diameter at top, 12,000 feet. Time to maximum height, 8 minutes. Visibility from ground, 360 miles. Radiation emissions. Gamma radiation at 1,000 feet, 1,000 plus rads, fatal. Neutron radiation at 1,000 feet, 600 plus rads, fatal. Combined radiation lethal radius, 4,000 feet. Survivors within lethal radius died from radiation exposure within weeks regardless of blast or thermal injuries. Buildings destroyed. Total, 70,000. Destruction rate within 1 mile, 100%. Destruction rate 1 to 2 miles, 80% wooden, 50% reinforced concrete. The measurements became baseline for calculating nuclear weapon effects. Every subsequent nuclear weapon tested or deployed was evaluated against Hiroshima measurements. The data collected August 6th.
It was 1945 established framework for understanding atomic warfare that persists 8 decades later. Thermal radiation created permanent scientific instruments recording weapon effects with precision impossible through conventional documentation. Human shadow on bank steps, person sitting waiting for bank to open, vaporized instantly. Body blocked thermal radiation for 1/1,000,000th of second. Silhouette remained on stone steps. Shadow showed person's posture, sitting, leaning slightly forward. Shadow remained visible for decades. Became pilgrimage site for survivors. Physical evidence that human being existed in that location at that moment, then ceased to exist. Only shadow proved they had been there. Ladder shadow on wall. 15-foot ladder leaning against building. Vaporized. Perfect outline remained showing every rung. Shadow documented blast angle and intensity through geometric analysis. Scientists calculated thermal radiation intensity by measuring shadow darkness. The ladder that no longer existed became measuring instrument for weapon that destroyed it. Child's shadow on playground equipment. Height based on shadow length, 3 feet 2 inches. Age estimated, 5 to 7 years.
Position: climbing on jungle gym bars. Shadow showed fingers gripping bar, 1 foot raised mid-climb. Thermal pulse caught child in motion. Shadow analysis revealed child was facing north, watching bomber approach. Last action: looking up at aircraft that killed them. Shadow preserved final moment of childhood wonder transformed into annihilation. Multiple shadows at streetcar stop. 7 distinct human shadows overlapping. Shadow analysis revealed 2 adults standing, 3 children sitting on bench, 2 people mid-stride walking towards stop. All 7 vaporized simultaneously. Shadow density variations allowed reconstruction of clothing, women in kimono, men in work clothes, children in school uniforms. The streetcar stop became snapshot of ordinary morning, frozen in permanent negative. The shadows told story of people waiting for transportation that would never arrive. The shadows were scientific instruments encoding data about thermal radiation intensity, duration, and geometry. Each shadow provided measurements enabling calculation of weapon yield, blast radius, and thermal pulse characteristics. The negative images where humans had stood became positive proof of weapons' power measured through absence rather than presence. 8:17 a.m. 1 minute after detonation, immediate destruction phase complete. Secondary effects manifesting across wider area. Thermal radiation had ignited thousands of fires across 4.4 square miles. Initially small, burning wood, paper, fabric, spreading rapidly through wind from blast wave and abundance of flammable materials. Within 30 minutes, fires would merge into firestorm. Blast wave damage extended 5 square miles in circular patterns centered on ground zero. Damage precisely correlated with distance. Within 1,000 feet, total destruction, no structures standing.
No survivors. 1,000 to 3,000 feet. Reinforced concrete survived but heavily damaged. Windows blown out. Walls collapsed. Contents destroyed. 3,000 to 8,000 feet. Wooden buildings destroyed. Only foundations remaining. Reinforced concrete survived but damaged. Casualties nearly universal among unprotected people. Casualties in first minute. Approximately 70,000 deaths from thermal radiation, blast trauma, and traumatic injuries from flying debris. Death rate nearly 100% within 3,000 feet, decreased gradually with distance. Injury rate even higher. Virtually everyone within 10,000 feet injured. Hiroshima Communications Hospital, 1.2 miles from ground zero. Zone of severe damage but not total destruction. Reinforced concrete survived but heavily damaged. Windows shattered, walls cracked, portions of upper floors collapsed.
Hachiya, injured by flying glass and debris, able to function. Most medical staff survived but injured. Most patients survived. The injured required immediate treatment. Within minutes, injured arriving seeking treatment. Casualties presented injuries medical staff never encountered. Severe burns without apparent fire source. Blast trauma without obvious cause. Combination injuries suggesting multiple simultaneous insults to human body. Staff began treating using conventional techniques. Quickly recognized casualties exceeded capacity. Injury patterns didn't match medical literature. 8:30 a.m. Dr. Hachiya's medical training provided no framework for injuries he was treating. Patient number 1, male, age 34. Burns covering 80% of body surface, no exposure to flame. Thermal radiation had penetrated clothing and skin simultaneously. Burns showed pattern inconsistent with fire, uniform depth, sharp boundaries where clothing had provided minimal protection. Conventional burn treatment protocols inadequate. Fluid replacement couldn't match loss rate. Skin grafting impossible with such extensive damage. Patient died within 6 hours. Hachiya documented cause of death, thermal radiation burns, mechanism unknown. Patient number 2, female, age 28, blast trauma without external bleeding. Arrived ambulatory complaining of abdominal pain. Physical examination revealed rigidity, suggesting internal injury. No external wounds visible. Patient deteriorated rapidly. Died within 2 hours. Autopsy, conducted later, revealed internal organs liquefied by pressure wave. Cavitation effects from blast overpressure had created bubbles in tissue that collapsed violently, liver lacerated, spleen ruptured, intestines torn, injuries impossible to diagnose without surgery, impossible to treat even with surgery. Patient died from injuries that were invisible externally but fatal internally. Patient number 3, male, age 19, appeared uninjured initially, minor cuts from flying glass, bandaged and released, returned 8 days later, hair falling out, bleeding gums, purple spots on skin, petechiae indicating internal bleeding, fever, weakness, nausea. Blood tests showed white cell count dropping, platelets disappearing, immune system collapsing. No apparent cause. Patient denied further trauma, insisted he felt fine until symptoms began 3 days ago. Condition deteriorated steadily, died after 19 days. Hachiya documented cause of death, unknown systemic failure, possibly related to explosion exposure. Medical staff recognized pattern. Patients who appeared to survive were dying weeks later from mysterious illness that conventional medicine couldn't treat or explain. The staff worked continuously but couldn't save patients who died from mechanisms that medical science hadn't encountered. Hachiya wrote in diary August 6th evening, "I am treating injuries I cannot diagnose using methods that do not work for reasons I do not understand. The weapon that did this is beyond my medical knowledge. Perhaps it is beyond human knowledge." 8:45 a.m. 30 minutes after detonation. Rain began falling across western and northern suburbs. Not normal rain. Black rain. Radioactive precipitation carrying death in droplets. Formation mechanism. Mushroom cloud carried vaporized materials to 40,000 feet. Concrete dust. Soil particles. Building materials. Human remains. Fission products. Radioactive isotopes created by nuclear reaction. Water vapor condensed around radioactive particles forming droplets heavy with contamination. Geographic distribution. Black rain fell across 12 square miles northwest of Ground Zero. Primary zone, 6 square miles, receiving heavy contamination. Secondary zone, additional 6 square miles receiving lighter contamination. Rain began 8:45 a.m., continued until 10:30 a.m. Duration, approximately 2 hours. Physical characteristics. Survivors described rain as thick like tar, heavy black drops, sticky and oily, smelled strange, metallic, burnt, stained clothes, permanently black. Rain left dark residue on skin that wouldn't wash off easily, contaminated everything it touched, clothing, buildings, soil, water supplies, exposure scenarios. Survivors fleeing city walk through black rain, thought rain would cool burns, wash off ash, provide drinking water relief. They were wrong. Children caught rain in cups and drank contaminated water. Adults washed burns with radioactive water. Everyone exposed absorbed additional radiation dose beyond initial blast exposure. Radioactive composition. Rain contained multiple isotopes. Iodine 131, half-life 8 days, concentrated in thyroid gland. Cesium 137, half-life 30 years, distributed throughout body. Strontium 90, half-life 29 years, concentrated in bones. The mixture created both acute and long-term exposure scenarios. Medical consequences. Black rain victims developed radiation sickness patterns similar to those closer to Ground Zero, but symptoms appeared later, weeks rather than days. Initial exposure seemed minor, no immediate burns or blast trauma, but radiation dose from contaminated rain caused delayed effects, cancer rates,
Black rain zones showed elevated cancer rates decades after exposure. Thyroid cancer from iodine-131, leukemia from bone marrow damage, lung cancer from inhaled particles. The rain added thousands to casualty count beyond immediate blast victims. Survivor testimony. Yamamoto Kazuko, age 12 in 1945, described experience. We were walking away from the city when the rain started. My mother said we should wash our faces because we were covered in ash. We let the rain wash over us. We drank from puddles because we were so thirsty. The water tasted strange, but we were desperate. I didn't know we were drinking poison. None of us knew. 30 years later, I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. The doctors said it was probably from the rain. The rain that we thought would save us actually killed us slowly. The black rain proved that atomic weapons killed through multiple mechanisms. Blast and thermal radiation caused immediate deaths, but radioactive fallout extended weapons' reach, killing people who thought they'd escaped. The rain made entire zones uninhabitable, contaminated food and water supplies, created exposure pathways that persisted for decades. 9 a.m. Meanwhile, in Washington, President Truman was asleep. Time difference meant explosion occurred at 7:16 p.m. August 5th, Washington time. Truman wouldn't learn of mission success until morning briefing approximately 12 hours after attack. Meanwhile, aboard Enola Gay returning to Tinian, crew processed what they had witnessed. Tail Gunner Staff Sergeant George Caron watched mushroom cloud recede. Wrote in diary, "That city we saw had 300,000 people in it. Now, most of them are dead. I can still see that cloud. I'll see it for the rest of my life." Co-pilot Captain Robert Lewis wrote in journal, "My God, what have we done?" The question would haunt crew members for the remainder of their lives. Meanwhile, in Moscow, Soviet intelligence was intercepting American military communications. Stalin learned of atomic bombing within hours through intelligence channels before American public knew. Stalin's response: immediate order to accelerate Soviet atomic program regardless of cost. The atomic age began with American monopoly that Stalin was determined to break as quickly as possible. Soviet program would detonate first atomic bomb 4 years later in August 1949. Meanwhile, in Tokyo, Japanese military leadership was receiving fragmentary reports from Hiroshima. Communications disrupted. Initial reports described enormous explosion and extensive fire. Couldn't explain mechanism or scale. Military officers initially assumed massive conventional bombing raid involving hundreds of aircraft. But reconnaissance flights reported only 3 aircraft observed over Hiroshima. Single bomb couldn't destroy entire city. The mathematics didn't work according to conventional warfare calculations. Meanwhile, at Los Alamos, New Mexico, Manhattan Project scientists gathered awaiting confirmation. When confirmation arrived via encrypted teletype around 10 p.m. August 5th local time, reaction was mixed. Some celebrated technical achievement. Others felt profound unease. Oppenheimer later recalled, "We knew the world would not be the same. Few people laughed, few people cried. Most people were silent." Meanwhile, in Hiroshima, fires were merging into firestorm. Refugees were streaming out of city, carrying injured, searching for water, calling for lost family members. Medical facilities were overwhelmed. Casualties were dying in streets because rescue workers couldn't reach them. Survivors wandered in shock, skin hanging in strips, hair burnt away, clothing reduced to tatters. Children wandered alone, searching for parents who were dead or dying. The city burned while Washington slept. Moscow calculated, Tokyo debated, and Los Alamos contemplated what they had created. 6 p.m. By evening, fires ignited by thermal radiation had merged into firestorm consuming 4.4 square miles, despite efforts to contain them. Physics identical to Tokyo raid. Thermal convection creating vertical column, rising hot air drawing in surrounding air, horizontal winds at ground level, spreading fire. Winds reached 40 to 50 meters from height.
Carried burning debris, ignited new fires ahead of main front, temperature within burning area 1000 degrees, killed anyone remaining in buildings or transiting burning zones. Firestorm smaller than Tokyo, 4.4 square miles versus 15.8, but equally intense within affected area. Complete destruction, no buildings survived, no survivors remained. Boundaries sharp, burned areas showed total destruction, while adjacent areas relatively undamaged. Firefighting response, ineffective. Most firefighters casualties. Equipment destroyed. Water pressure failed. Roads impassable. Few units attempting containment found task impossible. Only strategy. Create fire breaks by demolishing buildings ahead of firefront. Equipment and personnel unavailable for such operations. Rescue operations in burned areas ceased. Clear no one survived where firestorm passed. Focus shifted to treating casualties who reached aid stations, evacuating people from areas where fires still spreading. August 7th, 1945. Dawn on August 7th revealed devastation exceeding anything in Japanese experience, including March 10th Tokyo raid. Burned area, circular pattern, 1.2 miles radius from ground zero, 4.4 square miles. Everything destroyed. Within that circle, 70,000 deaths within first 24 hours. Another 70,000 injured. Burns, blast trauma, combination injuries proving fatal to many. Immediate casualty rate within 3,000 feet. Approached 100%. Structural damage statistics equally devastating. Approximately 76,000 buildings in Hiroshima. Approximately 70,000 damaged or destroyed. Within 1 mile, destruction rate 100%. 1 to 2 miles, destruction rate exceeded 80%. Wooden buildings, 50% reinforced concrete. Infrastructure damage made rescue extremely difficult. Roads, blocked by rubble. Bridges, damaged or destroyed. Railway trackage, twisted. Water mains, broken. Electrical systems, destroyed. Communications, severed. City ceased functioning as organized community within first hour. Wouldn't begin recovering for weeks. Japanese authorities attempted counting casualties. Task, impossible in immediate aftermath. Many bodies vaporized, no remains. Many bodies consumed by firestorm. Ash, not identifiable remains. Many wounded died during first days before reaching facilities where deaths recorded. Official death toll wouldn't be established for months. Remains controversial. Estimates range 90,000 to 140,000 deaths by end of 1945. August 7 to 14. Beginning 7 to 10 days after explosion, survivors began developing mysterious illness doctors couldn't explain or treat. Symptoms: nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, fever, hair loss, bleeding from gums and internal organs, skin lesions, immune system collapse. Illness affected people who survived initial blast and thermal radiation with minimal injury, people who should have recovered. Instead, deteriorated and died weeks after explosion. Death rate among patients with severe symptoms approached 100%. Dr. Hachiya documented cases in diary, described patients appearing healthy immediately after explosion, developed symptoms 10, 14 days later. Died within days despite treatment. Noted illness affected people near ground zero who escaped thermal and blast injuries through being shielded by buildings. Recognized illness somehow related to explosion. Couldn't identify mechanism. Illness was acute radiation syndrome, caused by exposure to neutron and gamma radiation from nuclear fission. Radiation damaged bone marrow, preventing blood cell production. Immune system collapse left patients vulnerable to infection. Internal bleeding resulted from platelet deficiency. Combination fatal in severe cases, debilitating in moderate cases. Japanese doctors had no framework for understanding or treating radiation illness. Concept of radiation damage, known theoretically from X-ray research, acute high-dose radiation exposure from nuclear weapon, unprecedented.
Doctors attempted conventional treatments, blood transfusions, antibiotics, supportive care. Limited success. Mortality remained high regardless of treatment. Radiation sickness created additional psychological trauma. People who survived initial explosion lived in fear of developing mysterious illness weeks later. Parents feared for children appearing healthy but might suddenly deteriorate. Uncertainty, psychologically devastating, added to trauma from losing family members, homes, community. August 9th, 1945. Nagasaki. 3 days after Hiroshima's second atomic weapon dropped on Nagasaki, demonstrated Americans possessed multiple weapons, willing to use them systematically. Nagasaki bomb, Fat Man, different design, plutonium-239 rather than uranium-235, implosion design, conventional explosives compressed plutonium core achieving critical mass, more complex than gun type, more efficient, converted larger percentage fissile material into energy release. Fat Man dropped from B-29 Boxcar, 11:02 a.m. August 9th, detonated 1,650 feet altitude over Industrial Valley. Explosion yield 21,000 tons TNT, 40% more powerful than Hiroshima, but terrain limited damage. Hills surrounding valley contained blast wave reducing affected area. Casualties, approximately 40,000 deaths immediately, another 40,000 deaths by end 1945. Fewer than Hiroshima, but still devastating. Psychological impact exceeded physical destruction. Japan now understood America possessed multiple atomic weapons.
Systematic atomic bombing could destroy Japanese cities until nothing remained. Strategic situation, hopeless. No defense against atomic attack, no prospect of developing countermeasure. August 15th, 1945. Emperor Hirohito announced Japanese surrender August 15th, 1945 in radio broadcast, citing atomic weapons as primary factor. Emperor's statement, "Moreover, the enemy has begun to employ a new and most cruel bomb, the power of which to do damage is indeed incalculable, taking the toll of many innocent lives. Should we continue to fight, it would not only result in an ultimate collapse and obliteration of the Japanese nation, but also it would lead to the total extinction of human civilization." Statement, remarkable for explicitly citing atomic weapons, suggesting continued war risked extinction of human civilization, recognition. Atomic warfare threatened not just Japan, but humanity. Emperor's personal intervention, unprecedented in modern Japanese history, demonstrated how atomic bombings shattered military leadership's commitment to fighting until destruction. Surrender ended Second World War, created new reality. Atomic weapons existed. Future wars between major powers risked nuclear escalation, could destroy civilization. Atomic age beginning over Hiroshima would shape international relations, military strategy, human consciousness for remainder of 20th century and beyond. Physical destruction, enormous, long-term consequences, extending decades beyond immediate casualties. Radiation exposure created health effects lasting generations. Cancer rates among survivors elevated, particularly leukemia first decade, solid tumors subsequent decades. Radiation exposure created genetic damage, affected survivors' children, increased rates of birth defects and genetic diseases. Psychological trauma affected survivors throughout lives. Post-traumatic stress disorder, survivor guilt many carried until death. Social consequences, equally significant. Survivors, hibakusha, faced discrimination. Employers, reluctant to hire, feared radiation exposure made them less productive. Would require excessive medical leave. Marriage prospects, limited. Potential partners feared genetic damage would affect children. Discrimination based partially on misunderstanding radiation effects. partially on stigma attached to being bombing victim. Japanese government eventually recognized hibakusha as special category entitled to medical care and compensation. Recognition slow, inadequate, according to survivors. Argued government compensation didn't match suffering experienced. Hibakusha advocacy created political movement, promoting nuclear disarmament. Peace education became central to Japanese post-war identity. Atomic bombings raised moral questions remaining disputed decades later. Defenders argue bombings ended war, saved hundreds of thousands of lives lost in invasion. Japanese military showed no inclination towards surrender despite conventional bombing. Alternatives, blockade or continued conventional bombing, would have caused more deaths through famine or continued warfare. Using atomic weapons, morally justified by military necessity, by ultimate humanitarian outcome of ending war. Critics argue Japan, already defeated, would have surrendered without atomic bombing or invasion. Systematic conventional bombing had made Japanese position hopeless. Alternatives weren't adequately explored before using atomic weapons. Deliberate targeting of civilians with weapon of such power was war crime, regardless of military rationale. Precedent established legitimizes weapons of mass destruction in future conflicts. Debate involves counterfactual questions, can't be definitively resolved. Would Japan have surrendered without atomic bombing? Would invasion have been necessary? Would invasion casualties have exceeded atomic bombing casualties? Different historians reach different conclusions based on available evidence, on moral frameworks they apply. Hiroshima changed humanity by demonstrating scientific progress created weapons capable of destroying civilization. First, atomic weapons created deterrence framework preventing direct warfare between major powers. Nuclear-armed nations recognized war between them risked mutual annihilation, made conventional conflict too dangerous. Cold War between United States and Soviet Union remained cold. Both sides understood nuclear warfare had no winners. Second, atomic weapons created arms race consuming enormous resources. United States and Soviet Union built tens of thousands of nuclear weapons, destructive capacity exceeding anything military strategy required. Peak arsenals, United States 31,255 warheads, Soviet Union 4,159 warheads. Combined destructive power 1.4 million Hiroshimas, enough to exterminate human species multiple times over. Third, atomic weapons created proliferation problem threatening international security. 9 nations currently possess nuclear weapons, others seek them. Each additional nuclear-armed nation increases probability of nuclear warfare through accident, miscalculation, deliberate use. Current nuclear powers: United States, Russia, United Kingdom, France, China, India, Pakistan, Israel, North Korea. Fourth, atomic weapons created psychological burden on humanity. Knowledge civilization could be destroyed in hours created existential anxiety, shaped culture, politics, individual psychology throughout nuclear age. Possibility of annihilation became permanent background condition, affected how humans thought about future. Fifth, Hiroshima created peace movements centered on nuclear disarmament. Survivors' testimony about atomic bombing effects created moral argument against nuclear weapons, influenced international opinion and policy. Movement hasn't achieved nuclear disarmament, has created normative framework, made nuclear weapon use politically and morally unacceptable, except in most extreme circumstances. Story of Hiroshima reveals truths about scientific progress, military power, human nature. First truth: scientific capability outpaces moral wisdom about its use.
Humans created weapons capable of destroying civilization before developing ethical frameworks for managing such power. Manhattan Project succeeded in building atomic bomb in 3 years. 7 decades later, humanity still hasn't resolved moral questions about when such weapons are justified. Technical progress, measured in years. Moral progress, measured in generations. Gap between capability and wisdom creates danger. Second truth, military necessity provides insufficient moral justification for unlimited destruction.
Effective weapons aren't automatically justified regardless of strategic value. Atomic bombs ended war, saved lives that invasion would cost, but killing 200,000 civilians in 2 attacks exceeded what military necessity strictly required. Japan, already defeated, already seeking surrender terms, already unable to resist invasion effectively. Whether atomic bombing was necessary or merely expedient remains disputed. Effectiveness doesn't equal justification. Third truth, precedent matters in warfare. Atomic bombings established that weapons of mass destruction could be used against civilian populations, created framework making future use more likely. Every subsequent nuclear-armed nation studies Hiroshima and Nagasaki, evaluates whether similar use might serve its interests. Precedent becomes permission. What was done once can be done again. Breaking taboo first time makes second time easier. Fourth truth, deterrence through terror creates temporary stability but permanent insecurity. Nuclear weapons prevented major power warfare for 8 decades, longest peace between great powers in modern history. But stability depends on continued fear, on rational actors making rational decisions, on systems that don't fail through accident or miscalculation. Stability based on terror, fragile. Single failure could destroy civilization. Peace purchased through fear of annihilation isn't true peace, it's extended crisis. Fifth truth, survivors' testimony matters for preventing future atrocities. Hibakusha, who shared experiences, created moral argument against nuclear weapons, influenced generations. Personal accounts of suffering penetrate defenses that statistics cannot. Numbers like 140,000 deaths, abstract. Individual stories of people vaporized, burned, dying slowly from radiation, make abstract concrete. Testimony transforms victims from statistics to humans, makes nuclear war imaginable in ways that strategic analysis cannot. Dr. Hachiya survived atomic bombing, dedicated remainder of life to documenting experiences, advocating for peace. Diary became one of most important first-hand accounts, provided medical, social, human perspective on unprecedented event. He wrote, "The atomic bomb was more than a weapon of terrible destruction. It was a psychological weapon. Those who survived could not understand why they lived when others died. The arbitrary nature of survival created guilt that many carried their entire lives." We learned that scientific progress without moral wisdom leads toward abyss. The day Earth shook in Hiroshima, August 6, 1945. Shaking continued for decades as humanity struggled with implications. Flash over Hiroshima, 1/1,000,000th of second. Mushroom cloud dispersed within hours. Physical destruction, repaired within years. But knowledge such weapons exist, permanent. Understanding human civilization could be destroyed in afternoon of nuclear exchange, shapes how nations relate, how individuals think about future. Shadow of Hiroshima stretches across human consciousness. Reminder that scientific progress without moral wisdom leads toward destruction. Hiroshima changed humanity forever, demonstrated we acquired power previously reserved for gods, power to destroy world we inhabit. Whether humanity proves wise enough to manage such power remains question, won't be answered until either nuclear weapons eliminated or until they're used again, proving we weren't wise enough after all. Evidence accumulates daily, 8 decades without nuclear war suggests wisdom growing, but 12,000 nuclear weapons remain in arsenals, enough to destroy civilization. Danger hasn't passed, has only been deferred through combination of luck, deterrence, restraint. How long that combination holds determines whether Hiroshima remains only city where atomic weapon was used in warfare, or becomes first of many. Choice remains ours. Lesson remains clear. Weapons remain ready. Wisdom remains insufficient. Danger remains permanent.